Maya Foster emerged from the glass doors of her prestigious law firm in downtown Seattle, clutching her briefcase with white knuckles. She'd just secured a landmark case that would cement her reputation as one of the city's top corporate attorneys. Yet beneath her professional smile, anxiety gnawed at her insides like a persistent ache. The applause from her colleagues still echoed in her ears, but it felt hollow. Her thoughts kept drifting to Daniel, her husband of 7 years, who had become increasingly distant over the past several months. The man who once greeted her with warm embraces now barely looked up from his phone when she entered a room. That evening, Maya returned to their Victorian home in the Queen Anne neighborhood earlier than expected. The lights glowed warmly through the windows, but the house felt cold despite its elegant facade. She found Daniel's leather jacket draped carelessly over the dining room chair, and a tumbler of bourbon sat abandoned on the mahogany side table. "Daniel," she called out, her voice echoing through the spacious rooms. The sound of footsteps came from the kitchen, and Daniel appeared, impeccably dressed as always, his dark hair styled perfectly. Something in his eyes made her stomach tighten. "You're back sooner than I expected," he said, his tone measured and distant. "I thought we could spend the evening together, maybe order from that Italian place you love." Maya slipped off her heels, trying to sound casual despite the tension crackling between them. Daniel hesitated, as if weighing his options, then nodded stiffly. "Sure, I'll handle the order." As Daniel scrolled through his phone, Maya watched him carefully. The casual lies had started months ago, small things at first. Claims of business meetings that ran late, unexplained charges on their credit card, sudden weekend trips to check on his restaurant venture. Each dishonesty had chipped away at the foundation of their marriage. Later that night, after a silent meal punctuated by forced conversation, Daniel excused himself to take a shower. Maya sat alone in the living room, her wine glass untouched. His phone lay on the coffee table, forgotten. She knew his passcode. They had once shared everything without hesitation. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the device. She scrolled through recent messages, her heart pounding. Then she saw it. A conversation with someone labeled simply as R. The message read, "Everything is arranged for Tuesday. No room for error this time." Maya's blood turned to ice. What arrangement? What was happening on Tuesday? She quickly locked the phone and set it back exactly where Daniel had left it. When she heard the shower stop, she pretended to be absorbed in her laptop, but her mind raced with dark possibilities. Could the man she had trusted with her entire life be hiding something dangerous? And if so, how far was he willing to go? The following days passed in a fog of paranoia and dread. Maya went through the motions at work, winning arguments in court while losing the battle for peace in her own mind. Every interaction with Daniel felt like a performance, both of them pretending everything was normal while secrets festered beneath the surface. She confided in her closest friend, Isabel, during a hurried coffee meeting at their favorite cafe near Pike Place Market. Isabel, a criminal psychologist, listened intently as Maya described Daniel's strange behavior. "Have you considered that there might be a simple explanation?" Isabel asked gently, stirring her latte. "I want to believe that," Maya admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But my instincts are screaming that something is terribly wrong." Isabel reached across the table and squeezed Maya's hand. "Trust your gut. If you need help, I know people who can look into this discreetly." That conversation planted a seed. Maya knew she needed answers, and waiting for Daniel to reveal the truth wasn't an option. She made a decision that would change everything. She would hire a private investigator. The man she chose, Marcus Chen, came highly recommended through her legal network. They met at a nondescript office building in Capitol Hill. Marcus was in his 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "What exactly do you need from me, Mrs. Foster?" he asked, his pen poised over a notepad. Maya took a deep breath. "My husband. I think he's planning something. I need to know who he's meeting, where he goes, what he's hiding." Marcus studied her for a moment. "I have to warn you,
Sometimes the truth is harder to accept than the uncertainty. Are you prepared for what we might find? I have to know, Maya said firmly, whatever it takes. Within days, Marcus delivered his first report. Maya received it at her office and locked the door before opening the manila envelope. Inside were photographs of Daniel meeting with a man whose appearance sent chills down her spine. A heavily built individual with visible scars and an intimidating presence. The accompanying documentation identified him as Victor Kane, a man with alleged connections to organized crime. He had been investigated multiple times for extortion and assault, though never convicted. The photos showed them in what appeared to be serious conversation outside Daniel's restaurant. Maya's hands shook as she dialed Marcus's number. "Why would Daniel be meeting with someone like this?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I don't have definitive answers yet," Marcus replied carefully, "but I managed to intercept part of a conversation between them. They discussed moving forward with the plan and mentioned that timing was critical." The wall seemed to close in around Maya. For years, she had defended criminals in court, understanding their motives and methods. But she never imagined she would find herself on the other side, as a potential victim. That evening, Maya tried to act normal during dinner with Daniel. She asked about the restaurant, feigning interest in his day. Daniel responded with vague pleasantries, his eyes never quite meeting hers. "You seem stressed lately," she ventured carefully. "Is everything all right with the business?" Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Everything's fine. Just the usual challenges of running a place in this city." But Maya knew better. Something sinister was brewing, and she was running out of time to protect herself. The question was, what exactly was Daniel planning? And how could she stop it before it was too late?
Marcus Chen's investigation deepened over the following week, and each new piece of information painted a darker picture. Maya found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, jumping at unexpected sounds, and questioning every word that came out of Daniel's mouth. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Marcus called Maya's private line, his voice urgent. "We need to meet. Now. I have something you need to hear immediately." They met at a parking garage in Belltown, away from prying eyes. Marcus handed Maya a pair of earbuds connected to a recording device. "This was from yesterday. Daniel met with Kane at a warehouse near the industrial district," Marcus explained. Maya pressed play, and Daniel's voice filled her ears. The conversation was chilling in its casual brutality. "The insurance policy is substantial. Once she's gone, there won't be any questions," Daniel said, his tone matter-of-fact. "And you're certain about the timeline?" Kane's gravelly voice responded. "Next Friday, she has a deposition out of town. The drive back takes her through some isolated stretches of highway. It needs to look like an accident. No complications." Maya ripped the earbuds out, gasping for air. The betrayal cut deeper than she could have imagined. This wasn't just infidelity or financial deceit. Daniel was planning to murder her. "I'm taking this to the police," she said, her voice shaking with rage and fear. "That's exactly what I recommend," Marcus agreed, "but you need to be careful. If Daniel suspects you know anything, he might accelerate his plans." That evening, Maya sat across from Detective Sarah Williams at the Seattle Police Department's precinct. The detective, a seasoned investigator in her late 40s, listened carefully as Maya presented the evidence. "This is serious, Mrs. Foster," Detective Williams said, reviewing the photographs and audio recordings. "But we need more. We need to catch them in the act of planning or attempting this crime. Are you willing to help us build an airtight case?" Maya nodded without hesitation. "Whatever it takes, I want him behind bars." The detective leaned forward. "This won't be easy, and it won't be safe. We'll need to wire your home, possibly have you wear a recording device. Daniel cannot know that we're onto him." Over the next several days, Maya lived a double life. By day, she was the successful attorney navigating complex legal matters. By night, she was an undercover operative in her own home, carefully steering conversations and documenting Daniel's movements. The police installed hidden cameras and microphones throughout the house. Every room became a potential stage for gathering evidence. Maya felt like she was living in a surveillance state, except she was both the watcher and the watched. One evening, Maya decided to test the waters. She and Daniel were having dinner, take out Chinese food spread across their kitchen island. "I've been thinking, Maybe we should update our wills and insurance policies. With how successful the firm has been, it makes sense to plan for the future. Daniel's fork paused midway to his mouth. His eyes flickered with something. Surprise? Suspicion? That's actually a good idea, he said slowly. I've been meaning to review ours as well. The conversation felt like a chess match, each word carefully chosen, each response analyzed for hidden meaning. Later that night, after Daniel had gone to bed, Detective Williams called Maya's secure line. We intercepted another meeting between Daniel and Kane. They've confirmed the date, next Friday, just as they discussed. We're going to set up a sting operation. But Maya, this is where it gets dangerous. We need you to trust us completely. Maya looked toward the bedroom where Daniel slept, the man she had once loved, now a stranger wearing a familiar face. I trust you, she said quietly. Let's end this nightmare. But as she hung up the phone, one question haunted her. How do you survive when the person who promised to protect you becomes your greatest threat?
The Seattle Police Department's Major Crimes Unit worked around the clock to prepare for what Detective Williams called Operation Safe Harbor. Maya found herself at the center of an elaborate plan that required nerves of steel and perfect execution. In a secure conference room, Detective Williams laid out the strategy. We're going to stage your death, Maya. It has to be convincing enough that Daniel believes the plan worked, at least initially. His reaction will give us everything we need. Maya sat surrounded by officers, technical specialists, and a prosecuting attorney named James Bradford, who would eventually handle the case. The reality of what they were proposing hit her like a physical blow. You want me to fake my own death? She repeated, trying to process the enormity of it. It's the only way to catch him red-handed, Bradford explained. We need Daniel's genuine reaction, his unguarded words. When he thinks you're dead and he's gotten away with it, that's when people reveal their true nature. The plan was intricate. Maya would drive to her supposed deposition as scheduled. On an isolated stretch of highway outside the city, the police would stage an accident scene. A team of special effects experts from a local film studio had been brought in to make everything look authentic. Crushed metal, broken glass, even realistic injuries that would be applied to Maya's body using Hollywood-grade makeup. Your car will be totaled. We're using a similar model we've seized from an evidence lot, Detective Williams continued. Emergency responders will be our undercover officers. When Daniel arrives at the scene, every word, every gesture will be recorded. Maya spent the next days in a strange limbo, going through her normal routine while knowing it would all soon change forever. She attended court hearings, met with clients, and came home each evening to share meals with a man actively plotting her murder. The psychological toll was immense. Isabel checked in daily, providing emotional support from a safe distance. You're one of the strongest people I know, Isabel told her during one of their calls. But don't forget, this trauma will need to be processed once it's all over. You can't just bury it. The night before the operation, Maya barely slept. She lay next to Daniel in their bed, studying his profile in the darkness. How had they gotten here? What had transformed the man she'd fallen in love with into someone capable of such calculated cruelty? Friday morning arrived with gray skies and persistent drizzle, typical Pacific Northwest weather. Maya, dressed carefully in a business suit, kissed Daniel goodbye as if it were any normal day and drove toward what everyone believed would be her death. The designated location was a curved section of highway surrounded by dense forest. When Maya arrived, the transformation was already underway. Police vehicles were hidden in the trees, cameras positioned at multiple angles, and the wrecked car sat in the middle of the road like a broken toy. The makeup artist, a woman named Kara, who'd worked on major horror films, approached Maya with her kit. I'm going to make this look incredibly real. It might be disturbing to see yourself this way. For the next hour, Kara applied prosthetics, fake blood, and bruising that made Maya look like she'd been through a devastating crash. When Maya finally looked in a mirror, she gasped. The woman staring back looked broken, lifeless. Places, everyone, Detective Williams called out. Maya, lie exactly where we discussed. Remember, complete stillness. No matter what Daniel says or does, you cannot react. Maya positioned herself near the wrecked vehicle, covered partially by a sheet. Hidden microphones would capture everything. Officers disguised as paramedics stood ready. The scene was set. Now they just had to wait for Daniel. The call went out through official channels. A traffic accident, one fatality, next of kin being notified. Daniel received the call at his restaurant. From a surveillance van hidden in the forest, Maya listened as an undercover officer delivered the devastating news. 40 minutes later, Daniel's car appeared on the horizon. Maya lay perfectly still, her heart pounding so loudly she feared the microphones would pick it up. Through barely opened eyelids, she watched Daniel approach. His reaction would determine everything. Would Daniel show grief, shock, or horror? Or would his true nature finally be exposed? The next few minutes would reveal whether the man she'd married was a mourning husband or a cold-blooded killer.
Daniel's BMW came to an abrupt stop several yards from the accident scene, tires screeching against the wet pavement. Through her barely open eyelids, Maya watched him exit the vehicle. His movements were calculated, not frantic. There was no rush of a desperate husband racing to his wife's side. Instead, Daniel stood by his car door, surveying the scene with an expression that made Maya's blood run cold, even through her perfectly controlled stillness. From the surveillance van, Detective Williams whispered into her radio, "Hold positions. Let him come to her naturally." Daniel walked slowly toward the wreckage, his expensive shoes crunching over scattered glass and debris. One of the undercover officers, dressed as a paramedic, stepped forward. "Sir, I'm sorry, but you can't—" "That's my wife," Daniel interrupted, his voice carrying just the right note of anguish. But his eyes told a different story. He approached Maya's body, stopping a few feet away. The hidden microphones captured every sound, the rain, the rustle of wind through trees, and most importantly, Daniel's breathing, which remained steady and controlled. "Is she—" Daniel asked, the question hanging in the air. "I'm very sorry, sir. She didn't survive the impact," the undercover officer replied sullenly. What happened next would haunt Maya forever. Daniel's lips curved into the faintest smile, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands, though Maya suspected the tremor was for show. "I need to make a call," he said, turning slightly away from the officers. The surveillance equipment captured every word as Daniel dialed. "It's done. Not exactly as we planned, but the result is the same," he said quietly, his voice devoid of grief. "Yes, the insurance policy is still valid regardless of how it happened. We'll just need to wait for things to settle, then we can move forward." In the surveillance van, Detective Williams clenched her fist in victory. "We've got him," she whispered. But Daniel wasn't finished. He ended the call and approached Maya's body again, kneeling beside her. To any onlooker, he appeared to be a devastated husband in his final moments with his wife, but the words he whispered were captured by the sensitive microphone hidden in Maya's collar. "You should have been easier to manage, Maya. All that intelligence, all that success, what good did it do you? At least now I can finally be free." Maya wanted to scream, to open her eyes and confront him, but she remained frozen, every muscle locked in place. Daniel stood and addressed the officers. "I need to inform her family. This is unbearable." His voice cracked convincingly, a performance worthy of an award. "We understand, sir. We'll need you to come to the station to answer some routine questions. But that can wait until—" "No, I'll come now. I want to help however I can. Maya deserves justice if there was any negligence involved in this accident." The audacity of his words was staggering. As Daniel was escorted to a police vehicle, ostensibly for routine questioning, Detective Williams gave the signal. Maya remained still for another 10 minutes until she received the all-clear. Only then did she open her eyes fully and sit up, her body stiff from maintaining the uncomfortable position. Kara rushed over with wipes to remove the makeup. "You did incredibly well. That must have been horrifying," Maya finished, her voice hollow. "Hearing him talk about me like that, like I was just an obstacle to remove." Detective Williams approached, her expression a mix of sympathy and professional satisfaction. "You were incredibly brave, and we got everything we needed." Daniel's own words have sealed his fate. At the police station, Daniel was placed in an interrogation room, still unaware that his world was about to collapse. He maintained his grieving husband persona, even shedding a few tears when questioned about his relationship with Maya. "We were planning our 10th anniversary celebration," he lied smoothly. "She was everything to me." Detective Williams let him talk, let him dig himself deeper. Then she stood and left the room, returning moments later with a laptop. "Mr. Foster, I need you to listen to something." She pressed play, and Daniel's own voice filled the room. "You should have been easier to manage, Maya. All that intelligence, all that success, what good did it do you? At least now I can finally be free." The color drained from Daniel's face. His carefully constructed facade shattered in an instant. That's not what it sounds like," he stammered. "Really? Because we also have recordings of your conversations with Victor Kane. We know about the plan, the insurance money, all of it." Daniel's hands began to shake, but this time it wasn't an act. "I want a lawyer." "Of course you do," Detective Williams replied coldly. "But here's the thing, Daniel. Your wife isn't dead. Maya is very much alive, and she heard every word you said at that accident scene." The shock on Daniel's face was absolute. The hunter had become the prey, and now he would face the consequences of his murderous intentions. But Maya's ordeal was far from over, because Daniel wasn't the only one involved in this conspiracy, and the web was about to reveal even more shocking betrayals.
The interrogation room felt smaller with each passing minute as Daniel Foster sat in stunned silence, processing the revelation that Maya was alive. Detective Williams observed him with clinical detachment, noting every micro-expression, every nervous gesture. "Where is she?" Daniel finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Safe, far from you," Williams replied curtly. "Now let's talk about Victor Kane and everyone else involved in your conspiracy to commit murder." Daniel's attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Gordon Hayes, arrived within the hour and immediately advised his client to say nothing. But the evidence was overwhelming, and Williams knew they had enough to charge Daniel regardless of his cooperation. Meanwhile, in a secure location across town, Maya sat with James Bradford, the prosecuting attorney. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but Bradford needed her statement while everything was fresh. "We have Daniel on conspiracy to commit murder," Bradford explained. "But Kane is still out there, and your investigator Marcus suggested there might be others involved. Did Daniel have any close associates, anyone he trusted?" Maya thought carefully. "His business partner at the restaurant, a man named Richard Thornton, and," she hesitated, a terrible thought forming, "and my stepfather, Harrison Westbrook." Bradford's eyebrows rose. "Your stepfather? What makes you think he's involved?" "Harrison always had an unhealthy interest in my finances. He married my mother 5 years ago, and since then, he's constantly asked about my investments, my insurance policies. Daniel and Harrison became close, too close. They'd have private conversations that would end abruptly whenever I entered the room." Bradford made notes. "We'll look into it. In the meantime, you should know that Kane was picked up an hour ago trying to leave the state. He's being transported back to Seattle as we speak." The investigation expanded rapidly. Financial analysts uncovered a complex web of transactions connecting Daniel, Kane, and shockingly, Harrison Westbrook. Large sums of money had moved between offshore accounts, and insurance policies on Maya's life had been recently increased, with Daniel and Harrison listed as beneficiaries through a complicated trust structure. But the deepest betrayal was yet to come. Detective Williams requested a meeting with Maya, her expression grave. "We need to talk about your mother, Catherine Westbrook." Maya's heart sunk. "What about her?" "We intercepted communications between Harrison and your mother. Maya, I'm sorry, but it appears she knew about the plan. There are emails discussing your accident and how they would handle the aftermath." The room spun. Maya gripped the arms of her chair, feeling like the ground had opened beneath her. "No, my mother wouldn't. She couldn't." Williams pulled out printed emails, her voice gentle but firm. "I wish I didn't have to show you these." The messages were clinical, discussing Maya's death as if it were a business transaction. In one exchange, Catherine wrote, "Once this is handled, we'll finally have access to her assets. Harrison, make sure Daniel doesn't lose his nerve." Maya read the words 3 times, unable to process that her own mother had not only known about the murder plot, but had actively encouraged it. "How long?" Maya asked, her voice breaking. "How long have they been planning this?" "Based on the communications, at least 8 months. The planning appears to have started around the time Harrison first met Daniel. We believe Harrison identified Daniel as a potential accomplice when he learned about financial problems with the restaurant." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Daniel's business had been failing. Harrison had money troubles, despite his wealthy facade. Together, they'd seen Maya, successful, insured, trusting, as the solution to their problems. That evening, Catherine and Harrison were arrested at their waterfront home. Maya watched the news coverage from her safe house, seeing her mother being escorted in handcuffs, her face expressionless. Isabel came to stay with Maya that night, holding her friend as she finally broke down. "My own mother. How could she?" "I don't have answers," Isabel said softly. "Some people are capable of terrible things when money is involved. But this isn't your fault, Maya. None of this is your fault. The next day, Maya made a decision that required every ounce of courage she possessed. She wanted to confront her mother face to face. Against Bradford's advice, but with Detective Williams' escort, she went to the detention center. Catherine sat across from her daughter in the visiting room, separated by reinforced glass. She looked older somehow, diminished. "Why?" Maya asked simply. Catherine was silent for a long moment. "You don't understand what it's like to watch your daughter surpass you in every way. You had everything: success, money, respect. Harrison and I were drowning in debt. It seemed logical." "Logical?" Maya's voice rose. "Murdering your own daughter seemed logical? I convinced myself you wouldn't suffer, that it would be quick, and that at least your death would serve a purpose." Maya stood, unable to bear another second. "You're not my mother anymore. You're nothing to me." As she walked away, Catherine called out, "Maya, please!" But Maya didn't turn back. That chapter of her life was over. With Daniel, Kane, Harrison, and even her own mother facing justice, Maya thought the nightmare was finally ending. But Kane's attorney had just filed a motion revealing even more conspirators, and Maya realized that the corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined. How many people had wanted her dead?
6 months later, the courthouse in downtown Seattle became the center of intense media attention. The trial of Daniel Foster, Victor Kane, Harrison Westbrook, and Catherine Westbrook had been dubbed the inheritance murders by the press, despite the fact that Maya had survived. Maya sat in the front row of the gallery each day, her presence a silent testimony to the evil that had been plotted against her. She had lost weight, and there were shadows under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide, but she refused to miss a single moment. The prosecution, led by James Bradford, presented their case methodically. Audio recordings of Daniel's callous words at the fake accident scene played for the jury. Financial documents showing the complex web of money transfers were displayed on large screens. Marcus Chen testified about his investigation, and Detective Williams walked the jury through the elaborate sting operation. But it was the testimony about Catherine's involvement that drew the most gasps from the courtroom. Bradford questioned a forensic accountant who had traced the money. "Can you explain the financial relationship between Catherine Westbrook and the other defendants?" Mrs. Westbrook was deeply in debt due to gambling. Her husband, Harrison Westbrook, had lost most of his wealth in failed real estate investments. Together, they owed approximately $3 million to various creditors, some of whom were connected to organized crime. And how did Maya Foster's insurance policies factor into this? Mrs. Foster had multiple policies totaling $7 million. Upon her death, the money would have been split between Daniel Foster and a trust controlled by Harrison Westbrook, with Catherine as a secondary beneficiary. It would have solved all their financial problems. The courtroom murmured with disbelief. When it was the defense's turn, Daniel's attorney tried to paint him as a man driven to desperation by business failures, manipulated by Kane and the Westbrooks. But the audio of Daniel's cold words at the accident scene undermined any sympathy the jury might have felt. Catherine's attorney attempted a different strategy, suggesting she had been coerced by Harrison, portrayed as a controlling and abusive husband. But the emails told a different story, showing Catherine as an active participant, even reminding Harrison of the plan when he hesitated. The most dramatic moment came when Maya herself took the stand. Bradford guided her through her testimony, establishing the timeline of discoveries, the growing suspicion, and finally, the terrifying moment when she realized her husband wanted her dead. "Can you describe what you felt when you heard your husband's voice on that recording, discussing your murder with Mr. Kane?" Bradford asked. Maya took a breath, her voice steady despite the emotion. "I felt like the person I had loved and trusted had never really existed. The Daniel in those recordings was a stranger wearing my husband's face." During cross-examination, Daniel's attorney tried to rattle her. "Mrs. Foster, isn't it true that your marriage was already troubled, that there were trust issues on both sides?" "My trust issues," Maya replied evenly, "turned out to be completely justified, didn't they?" The courtroom tittered, and the judge gavelled for order. But the most painful testimony came when Catherine's attorney called Maya to explain her relationship with her mother.
Ms. Foster, would you describe your mother as a loving parent? Maya paused, emotions warring across her face. I thought she was, but a loving mother doesn't conspire to kill her child for money. So I was clearly wrong about who she was. When Catherine herself testified, she showed little remorse, instead attempting to justify her actions by describing her desperate financial situation. The jury's expressions grew colder with each word. Kane's testimony was brief. He took the stand only to claim he was merely a businessman hired for a job, unaware of the full implications. No one believed him. Harrison Westbrook didn't testify at all on advice of counsel. The closing arguments stretched over 2 days. Bradford painted a picture of greed, betrayal, and calculated evil. The defense attorneys tried to create reasonable doubt, suggesting that plans and actions were different things, that Maya had never actually been in danger. But the evidence was overwhelming. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdicts. The courtroom was packed as the verdicts were read. Maya sat rigid, Isabel holding her hand. In the case of Daniel Foster, on the charge of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty. Daniel showed no reaction, staring straight ahead. In the case of Victor Kane, on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder and solicitation of murder, we find the defendant guilty. Kane smirked as if the verdict was expected and meaningless. In the case of Harrison Westbrook, on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and fraud, we find the defendant guilty. Harrison closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging. In the case of Catherine Westbrook, on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. For the first time, Catherine looked at Maya, tears streaming down her face. Maya turned away. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Daniel received 25 years without the possibility of parole. Kane received 30 years. Harrison received 22 years. And Catherine, whose defense had emphasized her lesser role, received 12 years with the possibility of parole after 8. As the sentences were read, Maya felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, sadness, anger, and something she hadn't expected: emptiness. Justice had been served, but it couldn't restore what was taken from her. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Maya with questions. She had prepared a statement, but as the microphones thrust toward her, she wondered, how do you move forward when the people you trusted most betrayed you so completely? And would she ever be able to trust anyone again?
3 months after the sentencing, Maya stood in the doorway of her new apartment, a modern loft in a different neighborhood, far from the Victorian house she had shared with Daniel. The space was minimalist, almost stark, a blank canvas waiting for her to decide what kind of life she wanted to paint. The divorce had been finalized quickly. Daniel hadn't contested it, perhaps recognizing that he had no leverage and nothing left to fight for. The house had been sold, the proceeds divided according to the prenuptial agreement Maya had insisted on years ago, a decision that had seemed overly cautious then, but proved prescient. Isabel helped her unpack, carefully placing books on shelves while Maya assembled furniture. "You know," Isabel said, breaking the comfortable silence, "you don't have to do this alone. There are therapists who specialize in trauma from intimate partner betrayal." "I know," Maya replied, tightening a bolt on a bookshelf. "I've actually started seeing someone. Dr. Patricia Lynn. She's helping me work through everything." "That's good. Really good," Isabel smiled. "And what about work? Are you going back to the firm?" Maya set down her tools and sat on the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. "I've been thinking about that a lot. Corporate law feels hollow now. I spent years defending businesses, navigating loopholes, winning cases. But what did any of it mean?" "You were brilliant at it," Isabel reminded her. "Maybe, but I want to do something that matters, something that would have helped someone like me." That conversation planted a seed that grew over the following weeks. Maya began researching organizations that helped victims of domestic violence and conspiracy crimes. She volunteered at a legal aid clinic, offering pro bono services to people who couldn't afford representation. And slowly, purpose began to replace the emptiness. 6 months after the trial,
Maya made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She established the Maya Foster Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping victims of intimate partner financial abuse and conspiracy crimes. The foundation offered legal assistance, counseling services, and emergency financial support. The irony wasn't lost on her, using the very wealth that Daniel and the others had tried to steal from her to help people who had experienced similar betrayals. Isabel became the foundation's first board member. Marcus Chen offered his investigative services pro bono for clients who needed help gathering evidence. Even Detective Williams contributed by conducting training sessions for staff on how to work with law enforcement. The foundation's first client was a woman named Jennifer, whose husband had secretly taken out loans in her name and planned to disappear with the money. Maya sat across from her in the foundation's modest office, seeing her own fear and confusion reflected in Jennifer's eyes. "You're going to get through this," Maya told her. "I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you will survive this, and you will rebuild." "How do you know?" Jennifer asked, her voice breaking. Maya shared her story. Not all the details, but enough for Jennifer to understand that Maya really knew what she was going through. "Because I did," Maya said simply. "And if I can, so can you." 1 year after the trial, Maya received an unexpected letter forwarded from her old address. It was from Catherine, postmarked from the correctional facility where she was serving her sentence. Maya almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity, or perhaps a need for closure, made her slice open the envelope. The letter was brief. "Maya, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I need you to know that not a day passes that I don't regret what I did. The greed, the desperation, they consumed me until I couldn't see what was most important. You were always what was most important. I destroyed my relationship with my daughter for money I'll never spend and a freedom I'll never enjoy. I hope you found peace. You deserve every happiness. Mom." Maya read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Lin had warned her that Catherine might reach out, and they had discussed how Maya might respond. In the end, Maya wrote a short reply. "Catherine, I appreciate your letter. I'm not ready to forgive, and I may never be. But I'm learning to let go of the anger because holding on to it only hurts me. I hope to find peace with your choices. That's all I can offer. Maya."